Well, my grandmama marched and my granddaddy too, and I never thought it'd be something that I have to do. But I'll march if I must. I got a mission to see, and I'll be damned if my children have to march for me. Now I believe in the power of raising my voice, and I believe in the power of making some noise. And if I die, I can sing, and if I can't sing, I'll die, so we can sing for one another. Now let's give it a try, and we'll say, I'm gonna sing, gonna sing out. Oh, I'm gonna use my body for God. Gonna march on, march on, march on, yeah, yeah. I got to keep on marching on, yeah, yeah. And I'm gonna march on, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna sing, oh, gonna sing out, yeah. Oh, I got to keep on, yeah, 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 yeah. Sing out. I'm gonna sing out, sing out, sing out, sing out. Lift every voice and sing. Oh, I'm gonna sing out. Gonna sing out. Oh, 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 I'm gonna sing out, and I'm gonna march on.
Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. My name is Efrain Flores. I'm a radiologist here at MGH, and also where I serve as Officer for Radiology, Community Health, and Equity. And I want to welcome everyone to the 2021 Juneteenth celebration, co-sponsored by the Radiology, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and the MGH Equity and Community Health Office. I want to thank our sponsor and collaborators from Radiology, the Office of Equity and Inclusion and Community Health, Center for Community Health Improvement, the People's Heart, and others who have made this event possible. Special thanks to Dr. Jim Brink from Radiology, Dr. Joe Betancourt from SVP from the Office of Equity and Inclusion, Carmen Alvarez, Christy Egan, Winnie Tobin, who have worked so hard behind the scenes to make this possible, and many others who have done incredible work to get us together today in this big celebration of Juneteenth. We have an incredible program today. We want to briefly provide an overview of the program, and we'll start quickly. First, we're going to have welcome remarks by Dr. Joseph Betancourt, who's the SVP for Equity and Community Health for MGH. We're going to have an introduction to the keynote speaker by Dr. Wynn Williams, who's the founding director from the Center for Diversity and Inclusion. Then we're going to have our keynote presentation by Dr. Fulilov, who will be introduced by Dr. William, followed by a presentation by Dr. Dan Shonday from the People's Heart. And then moving forward, we're going to showcase the work by the People's Heart here at MGH and beyond. And just want to remind everyone that please put, if you can add your questions in the Q&A, we will have a live moderated Q&A session after the presentation by Dr. Fulilov and Dr. Shonday. And now, without further ado, I want to introduce to Dr. Joseph Betancourt, who's the Senior Vice President of Equity and Community Health. the founder, senior advisor, and faculty of the Disparity Solutions Center here at MGH. He also is an associate professor of medicine at Harvard Medical School. And Dr. Betancourt is a nationally and internationally recognized expert in health policy, healthcare disparities, cross-cultural medicine, and has served on several national and international organizations, including the Institute of Medicine. More recently, Dr. Betancourt has led many efforts in the COVID pandemic for our institution and also at the state level that have saved many lives among our most vulnerable communities. Dr. Betancourt.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Efren, and welcome everyone. I am so excited to welcome you all. This is a day of celebration. I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your day to celebrate this incredible day, a national holiday. If you think how far we've come, even since our wonderful Juneteenth event last year, to be able to sit here and kick off our event and have it be a national holiday, it's an honor and a pleasure to be part of this incredible celebration and to celebrate this incredible moment in our history. I would say that in front of us, we have incredible optimism, incredible hope. And in the year since we've been together, we have now launched tens of millions of dollars in commitment, really bringing deeds to the words that we put together last year, commitments in our Mass General Brigham United Against Racism and our MGH Structural Equity 10-point plan that makes this celebration for me and for all of us, hopefully, a lot more special. We have advanced this work and we have a bright future ahead. And this is certainly a day to celebrate that. I want to express my deepest appreciation for the Department of Radiology and their incredible leadership. We have many, many partners here, but the individuals here from the Department of Radiology who have really centered our work around equity and inclusion, providing such incredible leadership around our arts, around our events. I can't thank them enough and really hold them up as a model department and their commitment. And it's an honor to be able to partner with them in these sets of activities today and in the future. I also want to express my thanks to all the partners who are part of this and a part of the planning and the coordination. It's taken a lot of work, but it takes a lot of work and it should take a lot of work to bring together such a wonderful opportunity for celebration here today at Mass General Hospital. I am also just thrilled to have somebody who I've looked up to all my career, Dr. Fulilove, who will be gracing our Zoom here today with his wisdom and his experience. Somebody I've learned so much from over the years at a distance and in my time in New York City and here in Boston. So I think that's a blessing that we have again to share, and I'm thrilled about that. Finally, I get to introduce somebody on whose shoulders I stand. I've been at Mass General for 20 years, and Dr. Wynne Williams has served as a friend, mentor, colleague, and undoubtedly a trailblazer and a series of trailblazers over the years at MGH. As Associate Chief of the Division of Nephrology, a leader on issues related to disparities and nephrology nationally, the founding director of the Center for Diversity and Inclusion, once known as the Multicultural Affairs Office, and somebody who remains a stalwart champion and somebody who we all go to for counsel and advice. It is my deepest pleasure to get to introduce Dr. Wynne Williams, who will introduce Dr. Fulilove. So thank you all so much. I will be with you all at the end to share some thoughts and reflections, but please enjoy. Bring your heart, bring your joy together today. Be engaged, be part of this celebration. This is what this time calls for, and this is what this event is all about. So thank you. And Wynne, the floor is yours.
Joe, thank you so much for that very, very kind introduction. And I just want to begin by saying this is a celebratory day. Juneteenth is now a national holiday, lots to cheer about. But I want to begin by thanking Joe back for his amazing leadership in his new role. We have really moved leaps and bounds ahead in terms of making progress on many, many different diversity initiatives, thanks to Joe and his powerful, energetic leadership. So Joe, thank you so much for your deep commitment to all of our efforts here at the Mass General. I want to thank the organizers of this important celebratory event for the invitation for me to be with you this afternoon. But I thought I would begin by thanking, as Joe did, Jim Brink, Dr. Brink, for his leadership in helping support and develop diversity initiatives since his arrival here from Yale and his appointment as chair of radiology. Jim has shown amazingly strong commitment, in my view, to embracing diversity and as a core value for his division and the hospital. And it's reflected in his mentorship, his support, and flourishing young trainees and faculty of color under his purview. And so, Jim, thank you again so much for your leadership. He was also co-chair of the hospital's diversity committee, and he helped orchestrate the MGH strategic plan for diversity, which culminated in the appointment of Joe Betancourt, who you just heard from, in his important senior vice president position as SVP of Equity and Community Health. So Jim, thank you again for your leadership, and Joe for yours. I'm going to give you some comments just framing June 10th and its historical significance. Juneteenth is short for June 19th and marks the day when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas in 1865 to take control of the state and ensure that all enslaved people be freed. The troops' arrival came a full 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Juneteenth marks an effective end to slavery in the United States and is considered the longest running African-American holiday. The Confederate General Robert E. Lee had surrendered at Appomattox 2 months earlier in Virginia, but slavery had remained relatively unaffected in Texas until U.S. General Gordon Granger stood on Texas soil and read General Orders Number 3, that, quote, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free," end quote. The Emancipation Proclamation issued by President Lincoln on January 1st, 1863, had established that all enslaved people in Confederate states in rebellion against the Union, quote, "shall be then, thenceforward, forever free," close quote. But in reality, the Emancipation Proclamation didn't instantly free any slaves. The proclamation only applied to places under Confederate control and not to slaveholding border states or rebel areas already under Union control. As Northern troops advanced into the Confederate South, many slaves fled behind Union lines. Let me turn to our esteemed guest, Dr. Robert Fullalove. I would just want to share with you, and I'm going to go back to the first slide there first. In a preliminary meeting with Dr. Fullalove last week, he and our team had a really wonderful conversation, and we were, I have to say, unexpectedly moved and inspired by many of Bob's observations. He just extemporaneously gave us a wide-ranging commentary on the civil rights struggle, his experiences therein, personal vignettes from his encounters with real icons from the period, Stokely Carmichael, Dr. King, and his views and observations on health disparities and health promotion. And among the many stories that Bob told us was a recounting of his own father's celebrated connection to the Mass General Hospital. And it was then, in that moment, that I realized that I myself had told his father's story to audiences here exactly a year ago at this same historical celebration. And only then, only now had I put two and two together, and I knew I recognized the Fullalove name. And so I'm going to share a bit of that story that I told a year ago in this slide set here. This is a slide, the first slide you see here is from the bicentennial celebration of the Mass General's history. And we then presented in 2011 as part of this celebration and these ceremonial gatherings, the untold story, underrepresented minority pioneers at Mass General. Next slide. So An important part of this story is the Julius Rosenwald Fellowships. And they came into being in the early part of the 19th century, 1920 to 1940, in 1917, in the 20th century. In 1917, Sears and Roebuck Incorporated President Julius Rosenwald established a foundation that included approximately 1,000 scholarships for fellowships to African-American students. And these are students from the arts and the sciences. In 1920 to 1940, in that 20-year period, 3 of the very first African-American physicians at MGH were recipients of the Rosenwald Fellowships. Next slide. So here we are in 1920, one of the first fellows, Theodore Kenneth Lawless, was a dermatologist. In 1919, he had graduated from Northwestern School of Medicine. He, in 1935, became the first African-American certified with the American Board of Dermatology, and at that time known as syphilology. Next slide. And here we have Harold Farmer, an internist in 1938, graduating from the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine in 1932. And now we come to the esteemed Robert E. Fullalove Jr., MD, the father of our current keynote speaker. He was a urologist who graduated from Howard University School of Medicine in 1934. He received his Rosenwald Fellowship in 1940, and he was the first African-American elected president of the Essex County Medical Hospital. And so I want to turn your attention to this slide here that just shows you very quickly stats that I think still are concerning to all of us. And we'll hear from Dr. Fullalove on his view and take on them. This just shows you that the national population distribution on the left-hand panel of Black, African-American, and Hispanic or Latino in black and green. The US population, African-Americans or those of Black descent or heritage, 13.4%, and for Hispanics and Latinos, Latinx, 18.5%. But if you look now in the right graphic, which really displays US medical school faculty representation, you can see that there is still persistent gross underrepresentation in minority faculty in schools of medicine and academic medical centers in the United States. 3.6% African-American and only about 5.6, call it 6% Hispanic or Latino. So in these many, many years, almost 80 to 100 years since the Fullalove pioneering efforts here and the Rosenwald Fellowship, still, we have a long way to go in terms of reaching equity and parity in terms of our representation in medicine in this country. Let me turn now to Dr. Fullalove. He's authored numerous articles in the area of minority health. From 1995 to 2001, he served on the Board of Health. We can stop the slides now. He served on the Board of Health Promotion and Disease Prevention at the Institute of Medicine at the National Academy of Sciences. Since 1996, he has served on 5 IOM study committees that have produced reports on a variety of topics, including substance abuse and addiction, HIV, AIDS, tuberculosis, damp indoor spaces, and health. In 2003, he was designated a National Associate of the National Academies of Science, an esteemed award. In 1998, he was appointed to the Advisory Committee on HIV and STD Prevention at the Centers for Disease Control, and in July 2000, he became the committee's co-chair. Finally, between 2004 and 2007, he served on the National Advisory Council for the National Center for Complementary and Alternative Medicine at the National Institutes of Health. And since 2010, he has been teaching public health courses in 6 New York State prisons that are part of the Bard College Prison Initiative. And he serves as the senior advisor to the Bard College Prison Initiative public health program. Dr. Fullalove serves on numerous editorial boards of the journals, for example, Sexually Transmitted Diseases and the Journal of Public Health Policy. He's been awarded the Distinguished Teaching Award at the Mailman School of Public Health 3 times in 1995, 2001, and 2013. And in May 2002, he was awarded an honorary doctorate from the Bank Street College of Education. And without further ado, I present to you Dr. Robert Fullilove. And Bob, we're looking forward to your keynote speech. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. And Dr. Williams, thank you so very much for your introduction. You know, there's a saying that if you want to have a conversation about history, ask an old guy to lead it. You see how long it takes to do an introduction of me and the work that I've done in public health. It leaves out 25 years of quite extensive work in the field of education. And it's a way of sort of describing the fact that as someone who was born in 1944 and who's looking at his 78th birthday, I have a rather broad, one might even say Catholic view of the ways in which a conversation about history today, at a moment when Juneteenth has become a federal holiday, is something that really for me represents not simply an honor, it's also something of a responsibility. I might even go so far as to say a burden, because I know that we are living in an age when we are so focused on the present. We are bombarded by information from our computers, our cell phones, and just the world around us that gives us so much in the way of data about what's happening at this moment. It becomes really hard to have an opportunity to focus on history and to see whether or not there are lessons to be learned from history that can guide us in some important way in the tasks that face us. Juneteenth is an opportunity not just to celebrate something from the deep, dark past. 1865 is a while ago. It also comes at a moment when we in public health are doing our best to become anti-racist in what we do. We in medicine are trying to do what we can to bleach out, if you will, all the ways in which teaching medicine is based on the assumption that race is somehow biologically active. No, we're trying to understand how much on a day when we recognize Juneteenth, we are part of a past that for all intents and purposes has routinely been ignored. History is just not a part of the curriculum of most high schools. The truth of this, I think, is well borne out by a survey that was done by the Southern Poverty Law Center in 2018. It asked American high school seniors one simple question: what was the cause of the Civil War? Only 8% answered slavery. It's worth thinking about, isn't it? The most important event of the 19th century for this nation, a war that killed more Americans than died in wars that this country fought in the 20th century, is something that is simply not a part of the way in which we help American citizens understand who they are and how much their national identity was focused on what happened with our 245-year history of being a nation that held slaves. I want to try in this talk to do some things about connecting us to history, not as a problem, not as a challenge, not as an effort to make sense of the past, but also as a way of foregrounding where we are right now as a nation, at a point when we're trying to come out from under the problems created by a viral pandemic, where we're trying to think how, as we emerge into something that looks like normality, we will take lessons learned from this pandemic and do what we need to do to transform the way in which we do medicine and the way in which we do public health. I want those transformations to be guided in large measure by the lessons of history. And I think Juneteenth gives us an unusual opportunity to do just that. After that preamble, this is where I go to the share screen, which is something you never get to do very smoothly. But so far, I think so good. I want to begin with an acknowledgement of what you saw in the slide that Dr. Williams presented, and add a couple of things that I think are really important to note. The Julius Rosenwald Foundation that was alluded to earlier was the foundation that basically sponsored the Tuskegee syphilis study. In 1929, when that intended study was going to diagnose syphilis, but also treat it, the stock market crash occurs. October 1929 wipes out a substantial portion of the Sears and Roebuck's fortune. And what remained was not a study that would do its best to bring public health care to folks suffering from syphilis. It became instead an infamous example of a complete abandonment of clinical ethics in the conduct of research. But what remains for me is the interesting notion that this not only made it possible for my dad, since the fellows became the major opportunity that that foundation used to have an impact on modern medicine. The time that my dad spent at Mass General made it possible for him to become board certified in urology and to have a career that would be largely centered around the treatment of sexually transmitted diseases, including syphilis. My dad wrote an article, a letter, that appeared in the 1943 issue of the Journal of the American Medical Association, describing syphilis as a Negro problem, where he tried to point out something that is reminiscent of the conversations we're having today in medicine and public health about the social determinants of health. The fact that my dad became a doctor concerned with STDs, with the irony of having a last name full of love, and to the degree that my own career in public health begins with an exploration of HIV/AIDS, begun in 1986, just a few, I want to say months before my dad died, is one of those ways in which the conversation I'm having with you today is imbued with a lot of significance and a sense that this is an important moment for all of us. It's important to point out as well that my dad was the son of a physician. Dr. Robert Fullerlove Sr. graduated from Meharry Medical College in 1907. He treated Spanish flu in the Mississippi Delta in 1918. He had the misfortune of having his wife, my grandmother, die as a result of Spanish flu. And he presided over a portion of a pandemic that infected my dad, my aunt, and my uncle with that particular virus. But instead of dying, they survived. And I know that my dad's interest in medicine grew in part because of how much, despite my grandfather's struggles, my dad's mom could not be saved. Thinking about how I'm giving a talk at Mass General that has so much history in my family at a moment when we're emerging from a pandemic is what I hope you will see as part of the theme that I'm going to develop in the course of my comments about, more than anything else, how we put the 400 years between 1619 and 2019, when slavery was first a part of the beginning of this nation, but then had as a set of consequences a variety of forces that have a great deal to do with the health disparities that we see today. If this talk is successful, part of what it will do is demonstrate that the legacy of slavery lives today in many of the health disparities and in many of the structural inequalities that we are so desperately trying to confront in the ways in which we teach medicine, the ways in which we practice medicine, and the ways in which we construct a system of public health that does in fact serve the population of the United States. Interesting to note that this image, which describes what happens when a Portuguese man of war is forced to dump, if you will, roughly 18 persons from Western Africa on the shores of Jamestown, Virginia, we begin something that would become a part of the structure of the United States and its creation. That the slavery process that you see beginning with this image is something that wasn't simply a part of an underground economy that existed in the South. Quite to the contrary, everything about the founding of the United States had a great deal in the way of its structure that was completely committed to maintaining the system that would emerge from the event that you see depicted in this slide. To the degree that public schools rarely engage us in any understanding of history, one of the ways in which I teach my race and health course at the Mailman School of Public Health is to ask my students to think about how race fits in the current structure of the United States, to reflect on how little they know about slavery, and to prove that they're not as connected to that part of American history as they should be by asking them a simple question. How many presidents of the United States owned slaves? If you're guessing at the number, you're proving my point, because a guess means that something as critical to the understanding of leadership and the ways in which it has created the nation that exists today might have in the past been bound up with what Kenneth Stamp described as that peculiar institution. To the degree that we're not talking about it, to the degree that it's not a part of the way in which we understand the leadership functions of the president's office, it's a way of saying how much we have failed in our efforts to help people see the degree to which the past conditions a great deal of what happens in our present. One of the ways of understanding the impact that slavery had on the structure of the United States and its founding is to look at the Constitutional Convention and point out the degree to which, in the language that was so prevalent in diplomacy in those days, you often saw in documents that described the United States a phrase that began, "we the people," giving a sense that in our democratic republic, everything that we've done to put together and construct this nation involved all of us being somehow engaged in the nation's formation. However, the picture of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia in 1787, the place where the Constitution of the United States was put together, kind of gives a sobering moment to the degree to which it is not really about the diversity of the United States, that the Constitution was put together by a group of men. There are no women present. There are no American Indians / Native Americans. There are no people of color. There are no workers. What you're looking at are folk who are the landed gentry, who made sure that the Constitution, more than anything else, established a foundation for the privilege that they would enjoy, and that would provide them with the power to maintain themselves and their families in a situation, in a status that would allow them to wield and use power in a variety of different ways. Part of that power was to derive economic benefit from the toil of enslaved people. And it's important to point out that there were 3 articles of the Constitution that specifically put the framework of slavery in the framework of the founding of the United States. Article 1, Section 2, Article 1, Section 9, Article 4, Section 2, all did a great deal to make it clear that slavery was intended to be a part of the economic structure of much of this burgeoning, developing nation. Article 1, Section 2 is the article that, amongst other things, provides the basis for the census. It allows for the creation of a democratic republic that would have a one-man, one-vote rule determining how people would be elected to powerful public office. It makes it clear that certain groups are excluded from the count. And in the very last portion of this article, it points out that for everybody else who has been included, we're going to exclude Indians and persons, include Indians who are not taxed, as well as 3/5 of all other persons. Well, who's left after the list in the beginning of the article has been identified? Who's left? Well, it is obviously the enslaved populations. And this notion that this defines people of African descent as 3/5 of a human being is probably not as accurate a way of describing the significance of this article. And it becomes much more apparent that what we're looking at is something about the way in which the goods that would be so much a part of the riches of this nation would include the way in which property in the form of human beings would be identified, and ultimately counted. Not so much because they would be represented, but because they'd be a part of the auditing of all the riches that are so much a part of what this nation was in a position to produce. Article 1, Section 9 is directed at the slave trade. It makes it clear that after 1808, you can't import human beings from Africa. If you do, they will be taxed. But it sets up a situation in which, for all intents and purposes, slave labor would depend on the ability of folk below the Mason-Dixon line to grow their own, if you will, to be able to make sure that using very important ways in which you breed human populations, you would always have access to the labor necessary to make the South the economic powerhouse that it was prior to the beginning of the Civil War. Article 4, Section 2 basically foretells what would ultimately be the Runaway Slave Act. It makes it clear that anyone enslaved in the South, were they to find their way to a state in the North where slavery was not permitted, could not be considered free. They were still property. Were they to be found in this place where slavery was not authorized, they were nonetheless to be delivered up upon claim of the party to whom service or labor might be due. You went back. So it becomes clear that if slavery was to end, it was going to take more than simply the ways in which the Emancipation Proclamation articulated a vision of the United States free of all the things that are associated with slavery. What was the nature of the emancipation? Well, as was pointed out, it was intended to be a way of depriving Confederate forces of access to slave labor. It did not provide an opportunity for the border states where slaves were authorized and where enslaved populations existed. It didn't count there. Lincoln was very clear. His emancipation was a tactic that was directed to help with the war. It was not something that was intended to free everyone who existed in a situation of bondage. It was going to require an amendment to the Constitution, having created in those 3 articles I just cited a structure that would allow slavery to persist. The only way it was going to change was not through a presidential decree, fine in a period of war, but not really capable of having the force necessary to assure that what had been created by the Constitution could be somehow eliminated. That would require an amendment to the Constitution. There have been a lot of films about the 13th Amendment because while it makes it clear that slavery has ended, it reads, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction." But it does make one very significant exception. And as is pointed out in the italicized text, the exception was as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted. Question: why the exception? Why not, after the end of a bloody conflict, just say, we're done with slavery? What's the purpose of adding that little bit of an afterthought that makes it clear that the exception to the rule will somehow serve in an important capacity to create a situation, I would like to suggest, that lives with us today? Understand that at the end of the Civil War, the labor that the South had depended on for 245 years suddenly no longer existed in the form that it had originally enjoyed. It became clear that if there was to be any economic recovery in the South, you had to have access to the labor that had at one point in time been provided by enslaved populations. What the 13th Amendment did was make it possible to use crime and the conviction of a crime as being a way in which the necessary labor to keep the South going could be produced. What did it result in? The chain gang. You could be arrested and convicted of a crime if you were a vagrant. You could be arrested and convicted of a crime if you were Black, if you were loitering. In many cities, you could be arrested and convicted of a crime if you were on Main Street after the sun went down, or you were present in a place in an urban area without the papers that indicated that you had the right to be there. And this image from Parchment Farm in Mississippi, I think gives a sense of how the South survives the period of Reconstruction by having access to labor that in many instances was provided by folk who looked like this and who existed in a status that essentially created a new form of slavery. It'd be interesting to sort of think about that particular period were it not for the simple fact that it exists today. This is an image taken, I think, 4 or 5 years ago. This is outside of Bessemer, Alabama. And what you're seeing is a modern chain gang, a way of sort of describing that if there is one legacy from the period of slavery that lives with us today, it has to be in the form of mass incarceration. Many of you have heard the statistic. As a nation, we are 4.2% of the world's population, but as a nation, we incarcerate 25% of all those who are doing time in a prison. Put in other terms, 25% of the world's prisoners are doing time in a facility somewhere here in the United States. And it becomes very clear that this is the beginning of our way of articulating how much having been incarcerated is part of the picture of social determinants of health that puts people in a variety of situations, provides them with a set of burdens that it becomes very difficult to overcome. And that has a great deal to do with much of the medicine, much of the challenge to medicine that we're seeing in communities of color. The notion, for example, that a Black man born in the year 2001 has a 1 in 3 chance of doing a year in a prison in his lifetime is a way of sort of understanding how the social controls that were imagined in the way in which the 13th Amendment was put together haunt us to this day, and haunt us to this day, particularly at a moment when we're struggling with COVID-19, where some of the most important concentrations of that particular virus were in the congregate settings that are created by prisons. This is the degree to which we're looking at something that, more than anything else, helps us understand why we are dealing with not simply a situation of social and health inequality. We're dealing with a set of inequities, a set of circumstances that literally do not have to exist. And to the degree that they do, they are unfair, they are avoidable, and they represent one of the most important barriers that all of us in medicine and public health have to confront as we do our best to identify the props that maintain structural racism and do our best to eliminate them so that we can create a situation where access to healthcare and enjoying the benefits of health is not something that is uniquely determined by race, ethnicity, or socioeconomic status. The notion that we are living with the specter of what was created by the 13th Amendment is, I think, neatly put in place by what you see in this slide. You heard from the introduction that I've spent 11 years now teaching in a variety of prison facilities in the state of New York. This is an image that is very typical of dormitory settings that you're going to find in most state prisons in the United States. The image of someone who is incarcerated being in a cell where he, she, or they are by themselves and have no problem social distancing. No, that is not the reality. What you're seeing here represents everything about the reasons why COVID-19 was such a deadly reality for those who found themselves to be incarcerated. These are congregate settings. People circulate in and out of them. Staff and incarcerated persons might, for example, go from a lockup in a jail to doing a much longer period in a prison. In the state of New York, there's a substantial amount of circulation between one prison facility and another. All the things that we understand from epidemiology about the degree to which circulation has so much to do with likelihood of infection makes it clear that what we have in our carceral systems in the United States are congregate settings, places where the virus can lodge itself, mutate, create variants, and continue to circulate with folk who visit, staff members who come in and out. We have literally created the perfect storm with our efforts to do controls over crime and punishment that in the era of COVID-19 continue to haunt us, because we're not just talking about what impacts the populations on the inside. It becomes abundantly clear that we're talking as well about how much mass incarceration threatens the health of all of us. Be clear that the problems with COVID-19 aren't the only ones that have to do with the manner in which prison settings, the manner in which carceral settings are settings where a number of infectious diseases will flourish, and as a result of their flourishing, will pose threats to those on the inside as well as to those on the outside. As this slide points out from an article that was in the American Journal of Public Health in 2003 by Hammond and colleagues, in 1997, at the height of the HIV/AIDS pandemic, 20% of all HIV-infected Americans had cycled in and out of a correctional facility at least once during the year. Once again, it's a way of showing how what happens in the prisons aren't simply confined to those settings. They have a real potential to impact in very dramatic ways the health of the community. This is from the New England Journal of Medicine, a piece that appeared in March of 2021. Points out that when applied to the US carceral context, with its approximately 2.3 million incarcerated people, 420,000 guards, and 11 million jail admissions and releases per year, what we've created is a churn that results in 55% turnover in the jail population each week, and that provides a constant supply of people who may not have been previously exposed to SARS-CoV-2, and ensuring that carceral and community health are intertwined. Worth repeating, carceral and community health are intertwined. Is it clear? What we're describing is how much our present is haunted by a past that literally begins with the 13th Amendment and even earlier, goes back to the establishment of slavery as a functional part of American society, that Juneteenth is an opportunity not just to look at a moment when that changed, it's also a moment to think about what remains. I think that more than anything else, if we understand how mass incarceration is linked to all of the things that we're trying to understand and make sense of in celebrations of Juneteenth, we're looking at a setting with this pandemic that demands that we rethink the logic of incarceration. I think that it's important to point out that in a pandemic that had the capacity to render the President of the United States ill, that if we're really focused on the public health lessons to be learned from this pandemic, we have to see that, as the slide suggests, COVID-19 demonstrates that all of us are potential victims of the consequence of the legacy and the history of slavery in the United States. The big problem with all this, at least for me, is how much and to what degree we are describing a situation in which, amongst other things, we get to think of incarcerated populations as victims. What's a problem with victims? Well, what we typically want to do for them is provide charity. And I think at a moment when we're looking at how shall we move forward as a nation, thinking about the possibility of providing agency to the communities that have been so heavily hit by mass incarceration gives us a way of thinking through how much what we do in medicine and public health can be a part of a partnership that could be created by those who have been victimized, if you will, by mass incarceration, but who are trying to find a way forward. You heard in my introduction that I've been involved with the Barred Prison Initiative. Some of you might have even seen the film College Behind Bars, which looked at the Barred Prison Initiative and was nominated for 2 Emmys last year. It is a program that has, amongst other things, in 3 of the prisons where it operates, a public health concentration that has produced a number of scholars who've gone on to do graduate work in public health and who are currently engaged in a lot of public health work in the community. In fact, the Barred Prison Initiative is proud of the degree to which those who have emerged from this concentration provide credible messengers at moments when we're trying to convince folk that they need to be tested for COVID, at a moment when we're trying to increase the levels of vaccination, especially in poor communities of color that have been hard hit by COVID-19. The idea that what you are dealing with are folk who can speak to the large number of formerly incarcerated persons who live in urban areas in the United States, the degree to which they're able to impact what happens when folk from this kind of background are now back home and are reluctant to engage in any kind of connection to officialdom, the degree to which folk who are formerly incarcerated who do not have access to health care are often part of the population that we see in emergency rooms because their reluctance to become engaged with officialdom means that they will delay health care to a point where what started out as a headache now has become chronic. What started out as minor bleeding has now become something major. We're talking about what happens when treatable problems with health have now become chronic, and where, as a result of not being seen, we are looking at a prognosis that's going to be much worse than might have been the case had we seen folks earlier. One of the major things that has involved folk from the Barred Prison Initiative who are doing public health work in communities is an effort to improve health communication between hidden populations in urban areas and those of us who are dedicated to improving the quality of health that exists in these neighborhoods, that by building a bridge, by being credible messengers, the communication can go back and forth. We learn about them, they learn about us, and in the end, what gets produced is something that one hopes will be an improvement over the problems that so bedevil many emergency departments, many hospitals and clinical settings in urban areas that are serving poor communities where, once again, formerly incarcerated persons are a hidden part of what exists there and a hidden part of what drives many of the health disparities that we have to confront. Just in terms of my own history with all this, there was an allusion to the fact that I go back a long ways, and it includes, amongst other things, engagement in this particular exhibit from the Smithsonian's new Institute on African American Culture and History. This is an examination of the civil rights movement in 1964. What you see in the image here, Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, for those of you who know something about Black history, Eleanor Holmes Norton, who is still with us, and then all the way down here at the bottom, there's this guy. That guy is this guy. And if you look carefully, you can see my name tag. This is an image of young people in Miami of Ohio who've been training to be a part of what's called Mississippi Freedom Summer. We're about to go embark on a program that is and was designed to increase the number of African Americans who would register to vote in the state of Mississippi. They are singing "We Shall Overcome." And they are not joyous because the night before they'd been informed that 3 of our colleagues had disappeared. They hadn't been heard of for a period of more than 8 hours. And the presumption was, and it was communicated to us in this way, if we haven't heard from you, you're probably dead. And on August 4th, 1964, it would be confirmed that Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner were in fact murdered by the forces of law and order in Philadelphia, Mississippi. But what you see here, it seems to me, is indicative of what will become the next part of the program here this afternoon. Part of what was so much a part of the civil rights movement, something that engaged me from 1964 to 1967, was how much we began and ended all of our meetings, all of our gatherings, by singing songs. What you're seeing here is folks singing, "We Shall Overcome." When we sang that song, part of what was so much a part of what was important to us was the belief that if you believed we shall overcome, and it was reflected in the quality of your voice, we would in fact do that. Juneteenth is not just, therefore, a moment to recall history. It's not just a moment to sort of think about how the historical facts of yesteryear live with us today. There are also ways in which we can celebrate a certain amount of optimism about the future, because whatever else is true, what has also lived in this country is a legacy of agency, that those who are oppressed, those who have had a book thrown at them, a boot on their necks, will find the way somehow to gather, to join, and with those of us who are in a position to do so, will create partnerships, coalitions, connections between communities and institutions that in fact can lead us to a brighter day. I want to believe that Juneteenth is a moment when we can understand that there's a new reality that confronts all of us. The world will have been transformed by this pandemic, and the question becomes, what will we make of it? What does Juneteenth teach us about the way ahead? I've suggested that the way ahead is to understand how much history lives with us today, how much history not only lives with us today, its memory should inspire us to move forward. And in inspiring us to move forward, perhaps create changes, confrontations with structural racism that will in fact produce a better, brighter day. I'm someone who was trained for the ministry. You might have noticed that there's more sermonizing than lecturing in the way I do approaches and talks like this. So part of the preaching tradition of Mississippi in the 60s was something that I heard and I found repeated in a variety of different films that are present even to this day. But they are words that I think are a neat way for me to end my comments and my observations for all of you. It is that moment in history, is it not? If not now, when? And if not us, who? Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention.
Dr. Fulilov, that was an incredible presentation. Thank you so much for this honor and for taking us through this journey. I would like to use the moment to remind the audience to send questions through the Q&A part. We're going to do a Q&A session after the presentation, followed by Dr. Dan Chonde, which I would like to introduce now as our next presenter. And Dr. Chonde is one of our radiology residents, and he's the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Chair for the American Rank and Race Society. He has also organized and launched a number of innovative diversity initiatives, including developing the novel Diversity X Mesh. And he also co-founded the RAP Bootcamp collaboration with multiple radiology departments across the country and the National Medical Association, the Student National Medical Association, and the Latino Medical Student Association. But more recently, he has launched the People's Heart Initiative, which is an incredible initiative to advance health equity by creating inclusive healthcare environments that foster healing of illness and structural barriers by leveraging the power of art. And now I would like to introduce to Dan Chonde, who will take us to the next part of this lecture today.
Thanks, Efren. I'm also controlling the screen, so lots of fun things. Yeah, so I'm going to talk to you about this new art initiative at the hospital. It's called the People's Heart, and our goal is just creating more inclusive spaces. Now, just kind of like a primer to everything, if you think art is unnecessary and you think this is all kind of just like, who cares? I want you to think, or I want you to learn that the MGH Lunder building, we spent so much time and mental energy and science on constructing that space, and it won a ton of awards. It's this level of attention to detail and purpose that really allows us to move to the next phase of anything. And, you know, just like a scientific experiment or any other type of scholarly pursuit, you know, we need to give that same kind of intentionality to the art and design of our physical spaces. Now, let's say you're kind of on the fence about this whole diversity thing. Here's a nice business argument for it, right? ESG. You probably haven't heard of this before, but this is something that a lot of investors are thinking about when they're determining who do they fund. It's something that people are thinking about when they pick their grocery stores, when they pick which restaurants they go to, when they figure out which companies they want to support, and increasingly what kind of healthcare and what kind of healthcare companies they want to interact with. ESG is our environment, social governance. So it's essentially asking, what are these organizations doing to better the environment, better society, and is their governance something that is positive to their workers? Now, if you might not have heard about ESGs, I'm sure you've heard about high reliability organizations. Those are the things that for some reason every hospital in the world looks up to and wants to be. Every organization wants to be this HRO, right? That's the lean, the Six Sigma, all that jargon stuff, right? Well, the first rule of high reliability organizations is this concept of preoccupation with failure, right? That's this need to always be on the lookout for things that can go wrong, look for larger problems. HROs and preoccupation with failure, that's what brings us this idea of safety officers, of a culture of safety meetings, of unfortunately safety reports, but still the idea of safety reports is a good one, right? So, you know, when you have a safety officer, you want them to sleep, breathe, and live safety, right? If they're always thinking about safety and they see unsafety everywhere around, you give them an award. Well, why don't we do that with equity, right? What we need is a preoccupation with inequity. We need to spend the same mental energy we have for safety and this thing we call failure and apply that to our failure of care, our failure of diversity, the perpetuation of inequity. And on that, so that's just to tell you that I'm a stickler for this kind of stuff, and I always look at things in a very bad way. So if you want to give me an award for being tough on organizations not being diverse enough, this is going to win me that Emmy. So first, we as a society are bad at collecting data on how bad we are with regards to race. That's just a fact. However, we, MGH, adhering to those poor standards, that's our fault. Now, we use this Hospital Consumer Assessment and Healthcare Providers System survey, right? This is the survey you think of. Look at this race, right? White, Black, African American, Asian, Native, Pacific Islander, American Indian, and Alaskan Native. I'm pretty sure there are more races, ethnicity groups than is captured there, right? One example is Middle Eastern, North African. Where do they fall here, right? The way we kind of think about these things is we always say, oh, well, we have to go to what the standard is. Well, the standard sometimes is not very good, right? The standard in this case is, oh, well, we go to the census. Well, the census admits itself it's not very good at this. That's why they're always trying to update things. During the Obama era, they had decided they were going to actually break out Middle Eastern and North African. But then the next guy decided, like, maybe that wasn't so good. And so when we can't collect data to the degree that we want, it's so hard to actually prove that we have issues with evidence. So we just have to kind of go back and we have to work on these things. Next step, right? Our society's standards and norms, those are influenced and reinforced by our lack of inclusion and our crappy data. And so are our MGH's norms, right? Now, if we think about society at that societal level, our face detection camera is racist, right? They say they don't pick up Black people very well. Here, this is something they found on these Nikon cameras. It just kept on thinking that some people from the Asian diaspora, it didn't read their eyes correctly, so it thought they were always blinking. Here's an H&M ad where they put the Black kid and the coolest monkey in the jungle, advertisement, and that's super offensive. And these are, of course, this idea of more macro or visible aggressions, and then you have these smaller things. But it's not so much the microaggressions that are bad, it's the insidious ways in which we allow this disparities and racism to exist in our system, where we have people who outwardly might not think they're racist, but then perpetuate racist ideals, right? And that's just because either they were taught that way and something becomes some sort of pedagogy, or they just haven't actually been called on it before. Now, 3, we, the medical community, we are bad at providing care to marginalized populations. We're busy. If we want to provide care, that means we have to go to those marginalized populations and bring them to us. So we can't just wait for them to come to us. We at MGH, of course, are not good at this. Now, here's this Boston Globe article. Of course, the Globe loves to tear MGH down, but, you know, they're not always wrong. Here we have color lines persist in sickness as in health. Most Black Bostonians don't travel 5 to 10 miles from their neighborhoods to take advantage of the hospital's immense medical resources. And they're talking about us. They're talking about Mass General there, right? And that's because patients feel out of their comfort zone. There is a perception of a hurdle. I don't think I can go there. Am I allowed to go there? Patients aren't coming to us because they don't see us as an option, right? And that's a big issue, because we offer services and we offer state-of-the-art staff, faculty, medicines that are well beyond some of our peers, but people just don't see us as a viable option because they don't feel included, because we have a history of excluding them. And so if we look at our resources and our surveys and they say, oh, well, you know, a lot of the Black patients who do come here, they feel like they receive adequate care. That's great. I want to get all those Black patients who don't feel safe coming here to us, and I want to help them come. Now, ways to do that. I'm an art guy. This is an art talk. I talked to you before about the importance of art and design. So let's talk about the art and design of our spaces. This is like platinum tier, Cadillac level. This is the MGH Cancer Center, the Illuminations program. You have a whole team of people whose sole purpose is curating art. The team is for a large part Meg Carlton, who we'll meet later, but you know, she meets with the artists, she has relationships with the artists, she knows who's who, she's able to bring in specific pieces of art, curate art for these spaces. Now, I mean, maybe this is like some sort of Eurocentric vision of what art should look like, which may not fit my particular taste, but still, there's a lot of intentionality here, and there's a lot of thought, and there's art therapy ideals and concepts at play here, right? This is the best that we can do. The idea of like totally dedicated staff, right? Take that a step down. This is what we see in some of our nicer outpatient settings. A very popular thing for corporate marketing to pick is abstract art. This is kind of like the elevator music of art. It takes up space on the wall, and it's not offensive because there's literally nothing there. It's just something you glance over and it covers a wall, but it is art. And of course, this is kind of the lowest level where there's nothing. It's just utilitarian. Posters, signs, blank space. Now, what we want to go is we want to go to that level where we have someone or a team of people intentionally thinking about pieces of art. I should mention that Illuminations changes their art every 4 to 6 months. It's always rotating. New art is coming, and people react to that. They have favorite pieces. Some people trace their treatments through the art that they see. People will buy art from those artists, even off the wall sometimes. So there is an opportunity to provide funding to the community through this. And that's where we want to be. Now, this idea of corporate marketing, it's abstract, it's on a wall, and it counts as art. and this, nothing, those are the spaces where I think we have room to improve. Now let's talk about art, health, and race or identity, right? Because, in this day and age, we are at a point where we understand that diversity means so much more than race. There's veteran status, there's gender, there's sexual orientation, there's disability and different levels of ability. There's so much more to it. There's limited English proficiency, but however you identify. Now, we typically think about art and its relation to health and art and its relation to identity. So art and health. So the overlap here is, what are the health benefits of art? This has been explored for decades now, with a lot of work coming out of this amazing hospital in the UK, Chelsea and Westminster Hospital. They have this incredible art collection. It spans decades. It's vibrant. There's performance art. They have a whole team and a whole philanthropic organization dedicated to this. Now, one of the amazing things that they did was they actually created a studio space recently, which allows art therapists to work with patients. You can think there's some opportunities here for communities to engage in community-led efforts in these hospital spaces. It creates a safe space to explore the benefits of art on health. Now, there's your standard, drawing a picture, painting a picture makes you feel better, right? And that's a way to work through issues. But even to a deeper degree, art in clinical spaces has been shown to lower patient blood pressure, reduce hospital stays, reduce maternal mortality, and I guess most importantly to some hospital administrator somewhere, increase patient satisfaction scores. So there's a lot of interest in what art can do, but in order to really mine that for all it's worth, you need someone with intentionality, understanding, and expertise to kind of curate this. And that's something that Chelsea and Westminster Hospital has done an amazing job with. And once you're able to do that, you're able to work with organizations on developing things like this concept of a future hospital. We can imagine a hospital where all of our signage is digital and changes at a blink of an eye depending on what language a patient speaks. So if you speak Arabic, all of the signage that you see, or when you walk by a sign, it automatically translates itself for you so you understand. And that's providing the highest level of patient experience. Now, of course, there's art and identity, right? Art is about self-discovery. Art is about teaching or telling a story to someone about something. It's conveying a message to the audience. There's so many options here that I could have showed you. This is one piece I love. This is Ann Hamilton. It's at the Dell Medical School building in Austin. It's called One Everyone. These are patients, right? When you think about, well, these are community members, right? So they weren't necessarily all patients coming into the hospital, but they stood in front of this membrane during these photos, which put some parts of their body into focus. And, we could have a long discussion about the role of health and the doctor-patient relationship in healthcare. We're actually writing a paper on that now, but this provides a very interesting view on that, where it's very patient focused. The patient is the one in power, which is, essentially what we want and what our medical societies dictate now, right? The patient is a team member. They're no longer just a consumer or something that we as healthcare providers practice on. Now, so we talked about health, art, and identity separate, but in truth, it's like this, right? Because at the intersection of health and identity, that's where our health disparities lie. And, at that intersection of those three, that's where I think we in this art, equity, health space can really make some contributions. So that's what we do at The People's Heart. Our goal is to reimagine our healthcare spaces through art and design so they promote health equity and better serve all of our diverse patients. Now, we practice our work via two mechanisms, right? This is kind of like the science behind it. There's this field of science called neuroaesthetics. Now, neuroaesthetics is the science that looks at how art affects behavior and emotion. Personally, my big interest is empathy. We don't learn empathy in medical school. We don't learn empathy in nursing school. We don't learn empathy in high school or college. Empathy is just expected to be something that we're born with or something that just like magically appears one day. But, you know, you have to teach it. You have to exercise it like a muscle. If there's a new population of people that you were exposed to, you need to learn to become empathetic to those populations. And so work has shown previously that empathy is driven by mirror neurons in our brain. These same mirror neurons can be activated through art. So in that way, art can be used as a tool to exercise empathy and to grow empathy. Now, a big benefit of art, as opposed to just kind of finding your empathy out in the wild, is the artist has the ability to define the socio-emotional context. Think about a movie versus if you see a couple on, you have a couple on the street and they're arguing. You view that through your lens of all of your experience in the past, and you make some sort of conclusion on that event. Now think about a movie. A movie is a piece of art. You have a scriptwriter, you have a director. They've been telling you a story up until that argument. You know so much up until that argument, and that colors your response to that interaction. Right? The artist has a way of telling a story to invoke a response. Now, the other aspect is experiential design. Experiential design is understanding how groups or people, individuals engage with systems and how we can optimize those systems to optimize how people feel, use, and learn from them. So, what is it, the thing that we do, right? Well, we do a lot of things, but the big thing we do is we hang art in our clinical spaces. We work with departments, we work with outpatient centers, we work with anywhere there's space. We are willing to help you put up railing and help curate art for you and rotate that art out. And each group of art, each installation focuses on a specific story or a specific element of health equity. And in that way, we don't have to please everyone with everything each time, right? One time we have something that looks at the Black experience. Then the next time we explore issues centered around homelessness. And then from there, we jump to holy, or we look at the experience of transitioning with gender identity, right? You're able to have something that's ever changing and ever addressing this like broad thing that we call diversity. Now we work with community organizations and community artists in partnership with the community to help us develop roots as a hospital and help us develop and strengthen this hospital community connection. And for you in the workspace, we create ways of developing empathy, which don't require you to sit through a health stream module, and hopefully will kind of burn themselves into the back of your brain. So the next time you see a patient, you think about some piece of art and it evokes a response. Now, one way we do that is, of course, you see the art hanging. If you happen to go by the first floor near the gift shop or near the entrance at Wang, you'll see some of the art. Each piece of art has a QR code. You can scan that code. It'll take you to our website for that piece of art. Each piece of art has its own website. Now, on that website, we can offer information about the artist, links to the artist's information. So if you want to buy some of their works, that becomes available. But more importantly, it allows us a space to have a discussion on health disparities. So we think about our population, we have these underserved communities, they see themselves represented. They see themselves and their issues being reflected in our ideals, and it becomes more clear to them that many of us are from the same communities. Many of us share ideals, goals with them, and we can partner in their healthcare. Similarly, it allows them to learn about some of the many opportunities we have at our hospital in terms of different healthcare subgroups and other opportunities we provide. For hospital staff, it provides links to advocacy organizations, ways that you can spend your time either volunteering or financially supporting, and it gives you some information about things that you might not actually know. As you're trying to develop information about LGBTQ terminology, this is one way that we could present that information. And then to the general public and patrons of the arts, new opportunities for philanthropy. Now, one of the things that we are working hard on is reevaluating the scientific underpinnings of design pedagogy. Typically, when we figure out if art is something, if it's like the piece of art that patients will respond to or not, it's done like this. You show them a bunch of pieces of art, and then you get their opinions on them. If you look at this, it's not a lot of diverse options in art. It's also, there's a lot of abstract art here. And the populations that they talk to are very homogeneous. So what we need to do is we need to do this through a lens of equity, right? We need to get more patients. We need to get more diverse works of art. We need to have more demographic questions and really figure out this central issue is like, here's the central issue, right? This is the Love I Vibrate at the Howard Brown Health Center in Chicago. If you drive up and this is on the wall of your healthcare center, will it negatively impact your perception of the care that you will receive? My argument is, me as a Black, cisgendered, heterosexual man, this will not bother me. I will see this, I say, oh, it's a nice piece of art. I will go in there and I will still expect high quality care. And that kind of kicks mud or dust in the face of everything that corporate marketing has led us to believe up to this point, which is that everything needs to be as formless as possible, because if people see something and they get upset about it, then they're not going to come, right? But if I am a gay man, if I am a transgender man, if I am any other things, and I look at this and this makes me feel like I'm being seen there, it's going to increase my perception that I will receive safe and healthy care there, and I'm going to want to go. So art has this way of showing populations that these spaces are safe. Similarly, there's this idea that, you could just show art by Black artists and that somehow, or show art by gay artists, or show art by women, and somehow that will create a diverse space. So I ask you, which one of these was done by a Black artist and which one wasn't? I'll give you a couple seconds to decide. All right. There we go. Surprise, they're both done by Black artists, but you wouldn't know that from looking at them because it's abstract. This is some other things we're doing, but we can talk about this later. I'm always here. Now, one of our biggest thing is supporting community art and art organizations. And, we can partner with these groups. We can help drive hospital money into the communities in a way that is reflective of health, but at the same time is more holistic. And with that, I really want to bring Dr. Fullalove back, because this, I think there's just so many connections here. I'd love to chat with him about it.
Thank you, Dan and Dr. Fullalove. The amazing presentation back to back to discuss very important topics, not only about looking back and how to understand some of the root cause of some of the issues that we're experiencing today in our communities of color, but also how do we use that information to avoid perpetuating the same problems and build a better future to overcome these structural barriers. So Dr. Fullalove, it's truly been an honor to have you here, and Dr. Dan, I should say, definitely I would love to get more to understand more how to build this better future. Dr. Fulil, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to open up also to the audience and Dan as well to ask a question, just more of a conversation. Given your experiences and all the work that incredible work that you've led and done and experienced, can you give us advice in terms of how to live with that optimism that you talked about, right? So because we know that there's a lot of things that are settled into the historical constructs that have been built into society that we have today. And sometimes taking a deeper dive into the work could potentially feel overwhelming for some. But you've been able to lead with optimism and show a better way. And in some of the programs, for example, the BART initiative, among others. And I just wanted to get your advice on for me individually, but also as to the audience here on how to live with optimism and build that better future that we're talking about with Dan.
Great question. And I think for me, it has a great deal to do with the manner in which we in medicine and public health approach the communities where we're going to be doing the work. We are often there because we have data, typically from surveillance sources, that indicates we're in a place that has problems. So we start out with the notion that this is a place that is struggling with a deficit of some sort. And that means that a lot of the communication we have with the folk that we'd like to work with, the people whom we would want to be our partners, begins with the notion, you know, I see you all have a problem. We got to do something about it. The alternative approach, and I think this is what is so much emphasized by the arts, and just so everybody knows, I painted all this stuff. I didn't get to talk about me as the artist, but you know, Dan was just like singing to my soul with all this stuff, because what does an approach that begins with the arts do? It eliminates the idea of deficit, and it has this fundamental faith that in everybody I contact, there is a power, a strength, and there is a wisdom that if I'm able to connect to, will make it possible for us to do great things together. I'm saying that we often enter communities with a point of view that obscures any effort we're going to engage in to help us see the assets that are present in the places that we go. So what happens when you enter a community looking for assets as opposed to entering a community looking for its deficits? I think the proof is in the pudding. Look for an asset and guess what you'll discover? You'll find them and you'll develop them. And what better way to create a partnership than building on the strengths of the people with whom you're engaged? Let me stop there.
No, we're gonna say I love that idea about empowering, right? So not looking at the community from the deficit standpoint, but more so about empowering and thinking of the community and some of the issues more as an asset. And that speaks also, like I really enjoy what you talk about, like the population that are incarcerated and the people becoming agents of advancing public health issues during COVID and beyond. But also Dan will be talking about later empowering community of people experiencing homelessness through off the grid activity. Just wanted to see, also ask about how do you identify the assets and empower them, just giving the tools to empower and really become change agents that will advance the cause?
Let me suggest that there's nothing better than education. Provide somebody with a text that they've never read. Give them a window into a world that is so much a part of the literatures of every culture on this planet. Have that become the point at which you meet individuals. And what are you going to discover? Certainly in talking about health disparities in a prison setting, I get an opportunity to ask people to reflect on what was the case in the communities that they were a part of. At Fishkill State Correctional Facility, where I've for the last 2 weeks been doing my in-person class on assessing community health, it is amazing to hear people sort of talk about a vision of what's going on in places where we're doing the battle against the pandemic, but where the eyes and the ears and the souls of the people that you're engaging have everything to do with how they're using epi data to make sense of very raw narratives that they're getting from the community. I love it when people are given a tool like epidemiology and start connecting dots that are based as much on their own experience, their own history, as they are the phenomena that we're struggling to make sense of that are right there before us. I think anybody who's an educator knows that when you walk into a classroom and you are absolutely convinced that with the acquisition of knowledge, there is power. I believe that everybody loves the whole notion that I'm here to provide you with a tool to do the work that you want to do and that is so necessary if we're going to do something important about impacting the communities to which you'll return. I mean, I've been doing this for 11 years. We have now, I think, awarded almost 100 degrees to folk who have a public health concentration in prison. Wow. They are all over the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. Some of them are working in the state. As an idea whose time has come, this is one. Pell Grants are going to make it possible for state colleges throughout the United States to maybe have the schools of public health provide exactly the kind of instruction that I think we've been able to do at BARD. Once again, an idea whose time has come. And a way of getting into communities in ways that explore their assets and their strengths and provides them with a way of developing them. Once again, knowledge is power.
Absolutely. And that's how you build the sustainable programs. And it's just so moving, right? To not only talk about the theory, but just like these are really concrete ways of making making a big impact in the community. Dan, I didn't want to interrupt with you. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask, you know, last year we heard from Hassan Jeffries, who's a historian out of Ohio, and he talked about this concept of hard history. So the things that you teach people, those are hard. I imagine someone walks into your class the first day, and if they're forced to confront these concepts of racism and classism and the evils of the carceral system, you know, that can really be difficult for people to overcome. And so the obvious kind of reaction is to either reject your teachings or to feel like they are being attacked personally. And, you know, that kind of is the same thing with issues of diversity, right? When we talk to certain audiences, we say, you know, racism is a thing. And then some people say, no, it isn't. It can't be because I don't like that hurts me individually as a white person or sexism exists. Well, that hurts me as a man because I don't want to be blamed. How do you, I'm sure you see this in class, but how do you teach around it? Are the students to blame for the perpetuation, are the white students to blame for perpetuation of racism?
You know, interestingly enough, I started my talk with you all by pointing out that nobody knows history. So there's nothing more powerful than telling somebody who's got an undergraduate degree from Harvard, I know something you don't know. And I got a lot of stuff that you don't know. Introduce them to, for example, a people's history of the United States. Howard Zinn. And all of a sudden, you become very clear that history is often written by the victors. You get to tell the story of your greatness because you're the one who controls the narrative. What happens when you give people another narrative? Well, amongst other things, in the United States, in a group that doesn't know much history, you get to compare what you thought and what you'd heard and what perhaps you learned with a completely different narrative. And it makes it that much easier to say, so, what's going on? You know what I love to do? I love to use something that came directly from Dan, some of the comments you were making. I asked people to look at the 1890 census for the United States. What were the groups that were counted? Blacks, mulattoes, quadroons, and octoroons. As I say, okay, everybody, who are they? And this is 1890. How did they count? Now, a mulatto is half Black. A quadroon is a quarter Black. An octoroon is 1/8 Black. How are you going to count of somebody who's 1/8 African-American? And how did you do that in 1890? So, I mean, it's one of the ways of getting people into a conversation about how much we have been led by ignorance. That makes it possible for folk to feel that structural racism is less about your personal biases, your prejudices, how you feel about another group, and especially for folk in medicine and public health, how much of this is going to affect what happens when you leave the walls of this institution and become a member of the community that you're there to help, to serve, and to ultimately treat. I love how medical schools are now looking at how much of what they teach has an assumption that race is a biological actor in health and disease. I mean, just asking people to rethink what happens if it's not an active part of the morbidity and mortality, the prevalence and incidence data that you're looking at. And all of a sudden you have people feeling less that this is about them and much more about how they're going to arrange the tools that they themselves will use at the moment that they graduate. I started teaching in the Freedom Schools in 1964. So that's what, 57 years. I want to believe that if you've been teaching for 57 years, you know a little bit about how to get into a classroom and get somebody to think in ways that are other than the sets of learning experiences that they've had thus far. And you know, for me, it's worked, you know, relatively well. And I think that recommending that approach, begin with history, because it's a way in which we can all understand things that we did not know, but things that we should know. That's the way to do it. And I really want to thank whoever put that piece in the chat about the 12 American presidents who owned slaves, or at least who had slaves at some point in their lives. I think I started out with that. I think I forgot to actually give the details. Yeah. So thank you for that follow-up. That's what happens when preachers get into a narrative. It's like,
Now, you said you were 78.
Yeah, I'm going to be, I was born in 1944, January of 2022, I'll be 78 years old.
Now, I know black don't crack, but is it like a serum? Is it like some sort of mask that you wear every night? Because I hope to look that good next year, let alone 60 some years from now.
And you know, the terrible thing is I use that shamelessly. Don't think I don't know I look good. Okay, so how about we just get that off the table? And you know, once again, I was surrounded in my time in the civil rights movement by some of the most significant and powerful orators of the 21st century, beginning with Dr. King, in whose offices I interned in 1964, Stokely Carmichael, Rap Brown, names that had basically been lost to history. But I know something about rhetorical devices and how to sort of engage them in a way that has this really work. I have, as a teacher, been surrounded for a good part of my adult life by 20-somethings. And I do believe that what I've learned is that people teach themselves to become old. You're not in that conversation when you're engaged with a classroom of folk who are looking to a future that's going to stretch ahead of them for 50, 60 years and haven't learned to have those conversations about my aches, my pains, my worries, my lack of sleep, what have you. No, I have to believe, and I say this to my students, that I approach education as a vampire. I'm sucking up all your energy. And look at what it's done for me. Yeah, 78. I'm going to be 78 in January, and I want to believe that a lot of that is because the energy that is provided in an educational setting and in a classroom has a lot to do with maintaining a point of view that is not so much about aging as it is about what comes next.
Well, thank you so much for coming, because you've been amazing.
Definitely an inspiration.
I want to believe that my dad is somewhere and he's smiling, you know, because I can almost feel the ghostly existential tap on the back. Thank you all. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Dr. Fulilove, Dr. Williams, I wanted to ask you a quick question for you.
Yes, please.
Hey, Bob, I'm just going to tell you, you look great. Yes, you do. As we say, does not look stated age.
Yeah. Does not look stated age. Yes, I love that.
So I wanted to ask you this. You know, one of the things that, you know, we've been discussing, and this is an article that appeared in the New England Journal in April 29th, looking at the diversity of the national medical student body. And this was an article by Morris et al. At Brown University, looking at whether in fact we've made any headway bringing into medical schools those who are underrepresented. And he looked at, this group looked at 40 years effort and trends in medical student matriculation, and found that instead of closing the gap is in fact widening. And that if you look, for example, with statistics related to Black men in medicine, the statistics show that enrollment is falling. And so my question is, again, we have these incredible legacies. We have made this incredible effort since the era of civil rights, and from the time that your dad was really pounding the pavement at Mass General. But we have these incontrovertible challenges in terms of, this seems to be an effort that never finds progress. And I wonder how you maintain optimism in the face of these kind of data and what's to be done.
We know it's ironic. I'm wondering whether or not they cited Shea and Fullilove, 1985, New England Journal of Medicine, minority access to medical education. I was a funder at that period of time, and the Fullilove who's mentioned is not me, it's Mindy Thompson Fullilove, a graduate of what is now the Vagelos College of Physicians and Surgeons in 1978 here at Columbia, who I think is arguably one of the leading African-American social psychiatrists in the United States. She and Steve Shea, who's a vice president here at Presbyterian Hospital, asked the question, what's happening since the 1970s when the AMA said, ooh, we've got to do more to diversify, amongst other things. So yeah, you're right. It's the same story told over and over and over again. Remember what I said about how we don't pay enough attention to history? Because right now we're looking at that as like, oh my goodness. We know that historically it has been a set of numbers that have never looked good. But I think the efforts that have been made since the 1970s to try and change what's going on says less about medical education and much more about elementary and secondary education. If you do not take mathematics in high school, what's the likelihood that you'll be in an undergraduate setting where you get to take calculus and therefore qualify for access to just about every medical school in the United States? The answer is almost zero. So if you've got a pipeline that by the time high school graduation has occurred is now dwindled to a trickle, why are we surprised that so few folk make the grade and find their way into medical practice? Or any graduate educational program that would change the numbers in just about every profession that we think is really important for the continuation of the American economy. I've always been clear that if we don't start at the beginning of the problem, upstream solutions, downstream solutions, that look at, what can we do to improve access to medical school will never really work very well because we're trying to widen a faucet that doesn't have very much in the reservoir that can come our way. So the more we start to look at patterns, once again, they go all the way back to the 1930s. Redlining, the ways in which we decided that the nation's urban areas in the midst of the Depression would have investment opportunities for banks to make sure that our cities became vibrant, that they would recover from the terrible damage done by the stock market crash. Well, what we did is say that we're not going to invest in areas that have lots of Black people. And if you look at the neighborhoods that were redlined in the 30s, and you carry them through to where they are right now, what are you going to discover? That those are the neighborhoods that had the highest rates of COVID-19, the highest rates of incarceration, and the highest rates of numbers of students who did not finish high school and therefore never got into the pipeline that we're describing. So everything about being anti-racist, it seems to me, begins with education. Even the CDC agrees the most effective tool we could use to eliminate health disparities have less to do with medicine and public health and everything to do with having the American population have at least the equivalent of 1 year of college. If we understand that education is instrumental in creating the conditions of health, then we shouldn't be surprised that education is also the key to making sure that we have a broader access to educational opportunities so that folks who want to be involved in health as physicians, nurses, dentists, or public health professions will find their way easily because their high schools have prepared them for the rigors of the graduate education that all of our institutions, mine including, are going to provide for them. I have to believe that the way to think about this is less about dealing with those who are ready to go to medical school and much more about those who should be ready to go if their high school simply give them the foundation upon which they can build.
That's great. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Fulilov. It's been definitely an honor, a treat for everyone, and just to have this rich conversation by everyone, by Dan, Wynn, everyone here. Absolutely amazing. And with that, I would like to just want to say thank you again for joining us in the Juneteenth celebration. We will transition now to the part of where Dan and the People's Heart will be discussing about this new exhibit called Off the Grid. Dr. Fulilov talked about empowering community, creating agency, and really thinking about not deficit, but more so about empowerment. And then Off the Grid, as Dan will discuss with Megan, more about empowering people experiencing homelessness to contribute to an art exhibit and not think about the deficit, but also how we can give them agency. So with that, Dan and Megan, please, the floor is yours.
All right. So we have a quick video, which I think we still have time to show because it's just so great.
My name is Alison Brooks, and I'm one of 3 co-creators of the Off the Grid project. Off the Grid is a collection of stunningly beautiful and diverse pictures, along with quotes in 6 different languages.
My name is Joanne Paul. I'm a photographer with the Off the Grid project. One day we were in a shelter and they asked her, who wants to be involved in this project where you get to take photos and we give you the cameras and you photograph what you see. They taught us how to hold the camera, how to use it, apertures, f-stop, all these things that a lot of us didn't know prior to them coming. And people, when they see that image, I look at their faces, looking at my photo, they see what I see.
My name is Herlivy Linares, and I am the Associate Director of the Lynn Community Health Center. We have had a lot of comments from patients, very impressive and inspiring to really see that people that had been less fortunate than us are able to express so much just in a picture.
When people come into a health center and they're expecting to look at a wall with maybe some instructions on it, they don't necessarily expect to see something that actually speaks to their heart.
I'm Dr. Kiame Mahania. I'm a family physician and also the CEO of the Lynn Community Health Center. In my family, there's always been this idea, probably from my great-grandfather, that performance art was intimately linked to healing. And so when I first heard about the Off the Grid idea, I was really excited because one of the things we do as a health center is deal with some of the most disenfranchised people in our community. And so the idea of having such a visual art for them, and that you're not seeing the person, but you're seeing their work, I think is great because it makes people think, oh, these people have value.
It gave us value because a lot of people look at us like we're homeless, we're no one. We're now visible.
I think for patients who are waiting in the waiting room, I'm hoping that when they see those images, they sort of undergo the same process and they start thinking, what is the art telling me? What is it saying to me? What did the artist want to say?
I really appreciate very much the fact that the quotes are in different languages because we have patients from all over the world. And I have seen their expression in their faces when they go and stand up in front of those pictures and trying to look for the language they can identify themselves the most and read the quotes. It had been impressive.
I get comments from the employees. And the comments are always around beauty. Sort of it's interesting that our employees are thinking of their workplace as a beautiful place, which really fits in with the whole idea of wellness, right? You want your patients to feel that they're coming to a place that values them and respects them, and part of that respect is providing them with a beautiful place to heal. It has been noted upon, it has been commented upon, but it almost always ends with, and it's hard to believe that this was taken by people who are suffering from homelessness.
All right, so at this point, I'd like to introduce Susan, Allison, and Joanne, three of the amazing people who are part of this Off the Grid project. Honestly, just incredible human beings in creating incredible works. And we at the People's Heart, along with the Boston Healthcare for the Homeless program, are so excited to be able to bring this work to Mass General. And it's so nice to see you all, especially you, Joanne. Joanne, you're muted. Could you unmute yourself? So,
Yes.
you know, I first want to talk to you because, you know, I know a lot about you, but no one here in the audience really does. So could you tell us, you know, how you found yourself in the position you did and how you kind of got involved in the Off the Grid project and how it brought you to where you are today?
I'm born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, went through the Boston public school system, went to UMass Amherst, got married, living what I thought was the American dream, was married for many years, and then the marriage didn't work. And so I found myself in a situation where I was separated from my husband. I had nowhere to go, took a step, leap of love, and just believing in God. And I just said, I have nowhere to go, so I'm going to the homeless shelter. So I ended up in the Lynn community, the Lynn homeless shelter. And that was never any of my goals in life when I was doing my 5-year, 10-year plan to be homeless, but that's where I found myself. And one day it was in the winter, and these three amazing women came through there, Susan, Allison, and Susan, Allison. I'm sorry about that, you all. They came through there and they offered us these cameras, and they asked us, who would love to take photos of whatever you see, and we'll give you the cameras. And that was just shocking to me because we're homeless and people go past us every day and they don't want to be around us and they look down on us. And we're basically what our program ended up being called Off the Grid. And they came through there and they gave us these cameras and gave us just one instruction: photograph whatever you see. And we were free to go anywhere we want with these cameras without supervision. And that was shocking to me. And we were able to photograph anything we saw. And that was very empowering to me. And that people cared about what we saw and what we thought. And to see our images presented at the State House. We did exhibits at the State House and other places like the Lynn Museum, a synagogue in Marblehead. And just to see people see what we see and appreciate what we photographed and get what we were trying to show you in our images, what we saw, it's empowering and amazing to me. And I'm just so thankful to these three amazing women. So
and at the time you had to take care of the camera, the memory card, and the Lynn Emergency Night Shelter didn't have day services, right? So you had to get everything out of there.
Yes, at 7 a.m, we had to take our possessions with us. I carried a backpack. I put it in a garbage bag because some days it rains. So I didn't want this camera they gave us. It was expensive that Cameron, Susan, and Allison gave us. I didn't want to get messed up. I didn't want anyone stealing it because you put your bag down, things get stolen easily. So they gave us these and we were able to go anywhere. We had to carry our possessions. I have rheumatoid arthritis. So walking around carrying my clothing, my personal toiletries, my jacket, my gloves, umbrella, and carrying this camera, the batteries, the cord, exactly, and making sure it didn't get broken, that alone was a feat in itself. Mm-hmm. And they entrusted us with these cameras.
And you were saying, you know, it made you feel seen. I think that's something you said in the video. So can you talk more about that, how it made you feel seen and what messages you were trying to get across?
Yes, being homeless, we're always invisible. If you're sitting in Dunkin' Donuts, they're quick to tell us, move along, get out. And we'll look down upon us if we're dirty, not clean, which is so untrue. We have showers there in the shelter. We're able to wash our clothes there. And no one really appreciates or talks to us on the streets. They go past you like you don't exist. But you know, we were treated as if we are someone, we matter, and that mattered to us. That made me smile every day, and it gave us purpose to get up and go do something with a meaning for the day. We weren't just sitting there all day watching TV. We now were able to go out, photograph what we saw, and show people what we saw, because Lynn is a beautiful city, and there were so many things you could document and photograph. When you're driving by, you don't see these things, but when you stand and you walk and you can look and admire a beautiful flower, and someone can see the beauty that we photographed. But I like taking pictures of other homeless people to put a spotlight on that so people can see what we see, that this is not normal. Seeing people on the ground sleeping should not be considered normal. So I want to put a spotlight on that and have people see what we see and like make a change. And this helped make a lot of changes down the shelter we were staying in. People listen to what we were saying now, because before we weren't heard. But with the power we were given with these cameras, we were able to show people what we were talking about, show them what we see and what we feel. So it was very empowering, and we were no longer off the grid. Now we were visible. Now we had a voice. They allowed us to speak through our photos without even saying anything, but here's a photo. Do you see what I'm saying? Can you hear what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And it came through. And we all come in life, we all travel in, I call it a canoe. Like my favorite color is purple. So I travel in a purple canoe. Another gentleman at the shelter, he was a gay gentleman, and his identity was transgender. And that's what he identified as, a transgender woman. And, well, forgive me. She identified as a transgender woman. And another gay man identified as a gay man. Another man was in the military. He was a military gentleman, so he was a veteran. And I said, your canoe may be red, white, and blue. The gay gentleman, his canoe would be the rainbow. The transgender woman, her canoe would be the pink, blue, and white. So we all have different canoes and we travel through life, but it doesn't matter what color our canoe is. We all travel through this life, down this river of life, and we became homeless through different reasons, but we're all together now, and we live together, we got along well, and we helped one another. And when these women came through there, they listened to us, they helped us. We were able to unite and show people what we see and what we do. And it was just an amazing experience. And I'm so thankful to Alice and Karen and Susan, because they changed our lives. Now I do photography a lot for my family and other people in our group. They continue doing photography, and it's very empowering. And to watch people look at my pictures and just see that they get it, makes me smile. It makes my heart smile. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I appreciate you for having us in this panel and to continue what we started and to keep it going. Thank you.
Oh, it's our pleasure, really. Susan, can you tell us a little bit about the technical development of Off the Grid? Like how it all came together, what the organization was, about the weekly meetings?
So briefly, we started in January, and this is about 5 years ago. We got donations and a grant to pay for cameras. We met weekly as we did interviews for people who want to be part of the program. We explained their responsibilities. We taught them how to get releases signed. And I think we started with 20, 30 people. And in the end, there were maybe 8 or 9 people because circumstances changes and people leave the shelters. And I'd say we met once a week and we went out. We had a group of mentors who helped us to supervise and to teach photography skills. And we had fun. We had fun, and it was a sharing of skills. And I think we all learned. And the most really gratifying piece for me is that my goal was just to go in and to help people learn to tell their stories of their personal experiences through art, through photography. And initially people were like, nobody wants to hear my story. Nobody really could understand where I'm at, et cetera, et cetera. And it was the most, astounding experience to have people take photos. We had a group of people who went through 6,000 images, and then finally to print the images. And to have a person without a home see a concrete image of what they are seeing was just the most, what can I say, heartwarming, thrilling. And then for the exhibits, that people actually cared. The people who came to the exhibits, I think that it truly increased awareness about other people's experiences of losing a home. And I think it was it served to build bridges.
Mm-hmm. And now you are also a licensed mental health counselor.
Right. I trained for photography. That's my third career, but my middle career, I was an outreach child family therapist. Mm-hmm. And I just have an innate, probably like everybody on this panel, an innate passion for change and making things better. And you do that, first of all, I believe, by increasing awareness. And then there's the piece of education, and it will always lead to change.
And so linking this together, right, because you're both healthcare workers, Allison, can you talk about, you know, as a doctor here, you were doing this thing that was so integral to health, but separate from the hospital, because this was something that you and 3 friends just started doing. What was that like? And, you know, how could you see organizations like Mass General could help you do this in the future?
Well, when I originally started being connected with the shelter, which was probably as much as 20 years ago, I was just a younger doctor at the medical walk-in unit, where there's a wonderful sort of opportunity to meet all different types of people. And it never really occurred to me that it had anything to do with the shelter. I'd been already volunteering at the shelter since about the early 2000s, mostly because I just think it was really important for me to take my rather sort of privileged white children to go along to a place where people from all different walks of life were living very, very difficult lives. And I wanted my children to actually see other people that they wouldn't normally meet in their rather privileged life. That was my original reason for going there. I actually went there with my synagogue. I'm Jewish, and I also absolutely love cooking and entertaining and bringing people together. I just really like bringing people together and having a good time, especially through food and also through song. We used to sing a lot as well. And that's how it all began. It actually had nothing to do with work at all. I never really wanted to be a full-time, purely doctor, a very unacademic person. I wanted to be a good doctor, but I thought that meant being a good person. And so I didn't really have any connection. Nothing, the two were not connected, but over the years, making parties and events and lovely things happen in this rather dismal, rather sad sort of location in which the shelter was. I would always be talking to people and listening to their stories, and the stories of the people living in the shelter just had to be told. They were very affecting and very touching. I also noticed that a disproportionately large number of the people living in the shelter came from either other parts of the country, and certainly they were Black and Latinx in general. There were some white people as well. It's a very mixture of people, but it was disproportionately BIPOC and people with sexuality and gender differences who would land up in this shelter. And I found those people so lovely, and I wanted their stories to be told, and then gradually met Susan, who I've known for a long time, and she likes the same sort of, she likes people, and we wanted to hear people's stories and make their lives better. And so that's how this project came about. But it was only relatively recently that I started to realize, really as a result of Jim O'Connell, who was running Boston's Healthcare for the Homeless out of the same tiny location that the medical walk-in unit was in. He came with me to see the shelter, and he encouraged me to get political.
which I hadn't really thought of doing. And so I gradually became the president of the board of the shelter. And it was really through this project that Susan and our other colleague, Karen, they were very more sort of organized about it than I was. I was more social, but they were, the three of us together with the fantastic clients who made this happen and who brought their stories and were so open with us and so generous with what they said as well as the pictures that they took. It made me realize how much needed to be done in the shelter. And so that year was a huge year of change at the shelter itself. As Joanne pointed out, there were things that needed to be done to improve the physical facilities and to even improve the policies and procedures and the way that, well, the fact that it was only open at night, it needed to be open during the day as well. So during that time, I was able, as the president of the board of the shelter, which I would never have been had it not been for Jim O'Connell telling me I ought to do it. And so all of this was happening completely separately from my job as a medical walk-in unit doctor. But now I'm starting to see how it was all meant to be. I mean, these stories, the giving voice to people, it's affected and informed the way that I practice medicine. I always think the social history is the most important part. And the way to, now that we have to do virtual care as well, it's so interesting to see the stories that people tell, and people can engage with you even across a screen as we're doing, if you can feel the story and listen to the voice of the person and connect with them. And I think that this project was just a part of that natural evolution towards where we are now, joining with you, Dan, in this magnificent People's Heart project. The fact that we can bring the stories of our community in the Lynn shelter and bring it into the hospital, it's sort of the beginning of the melding of medicine and social services. It's what we should be. We shouldn't really be siloed. Medicine shouldn't be separate from everything else that one does to try to be a good person or to help society. We should do these things together. And I think that art is the natural way to bring the social services and health services together. We can work in future. I'm being terribly long-winded, but you said, how do we see things in the future? I mean, if we could somehow bring into the hospital and into all the other hospitals' satellites, something like this, in which we healthcare providers team with our colleagues and bring art into the hospitals, that would be lovely. I mean, I think it would be a very beautiful way to make our health locations the most welcoming that they can be to everybody that uses the facilities.
I guess that's the next step. Well, so obviously we're having the Off the Grid installation come in July. We have to have a launch party, I think, because we have to have more than 15 minutes to talk. We have to hear like hours or half hours from each of you or something, because there's just so much richness here. Thank you all for coming. And now we'll toss it over to Meg, and Meg is going to talk about or introduce the video for the upcoming installation. And this is right here.
Yes, thank you. And thank you, Joanne and Susan and Allison and Dan. That work will be on display July 15th through August 12th on the wall across from Coffee Central at Mass General. And I have the honor of introducing our most current show, a collection of photography taken by Amir Liang Tat. As Dan mentioned earlier, it's on exhibit in the main hospital, in the front lobby hallway, as well as on the wall across from the main hospital's gift shop. So this collection spans 2 continents. It honors the Black experience, it connects history to present day, and it inspires us to move forward. As Dr. Fullilove said, if not now, when? And the answer is now. And by leveraging the power of the arts and community, we will make our medical spaces more inclusive with this attention to detail and purpose. We'd like to extend a special thank you to Amir Liang Tat and Lisa Liang Tat, Eric Bergstrom for hanging the show, and the People's Heart community for making this exhibit possible. So introducing Amir Leongtat and Ubuntu.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. I just want to take the time to introduce myself. My name is Amir Leongtat, and I currently attend the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth as a photography major, as well as the vice president of the Gamma Rho Epsilon chapter of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. Through this exhibit known as Ubuntu, I hope to illustrate the through line that exists between my people on the continent of Africa, as well as my people here in the United States. As you peruse through this exhibit, I hope to elicit the thoughts, reflections, and the pride that exists between each photo. I hope that you guys enjoy. Thank you.
All right. And with that, we've come to the end of our experience together. And this is an opportunity to introduce Dr. Betancourt again to kind of close us out and just bring us back together as a community.
Great, thank you so much. I mean, you know, what to say after such an incredible couple of hours that we'd spent together. I mean, I just, again, want to express my deepest appreciation to all the organizers, to Dr. Fullilove, to Dr. Williams, to all the panelists who expressed their, you know, passion and lived experience. And I think this is what drives us and drives the work that we do. I want to say one thing that I think is different than the past. And what I'd say is that we can celebrate today, not only Juneteenth being a holiday, but we can certainly celebrate the commitment of, I think, unprecedented resources, unprecedented dedication, unprecedented programs, and that is a start. And unlike many years in the past where we wished and wished and wished, this year, due to a lot of pain in our communities, whether it be COVID or the murder of George Floyd and countless other Black men, women, and children, we've been able to catalyze what is, yet again, what we hope is a small inflection point that brings us closer to justice. And the responsibility of this group now, after we celebrate, is to take action, to hold each other and inspire each other and hold each other together and accountable, but to be the change that we want to be, to take advantage of the urgency of now. Today's celebration gives us an opportunity to pause, to listen to messages about feeling seen and being seen in real ways, that I think will inspire us and again, energize us as we do the hard work ahead. In history, it is these inflection points that drive us better. And we know we will do better. We know we need to do better. And we know this will be a long journey. But today gives us an opportunity to look back over a very difficult year and say, with a deep breath, we've made some progress. So I want to thank you all so much for your time and commitment. I want to encourage you to be part of the event a little bit later today at 3 o'clock, the Royal House and Slave Quarters tour on this same link. You see the organizing committee there. Here's the virtual tour of the Royal House Museum, 3 p.m. Live stream. And again, I wish everyone a wonderful afternoon, a wonderful weekend, a fantastic Juneteenth, and just calling all of us to arms and to be, again, part of this incredible change and inspired by what we saw today. So thank you all so much. And I wish you all a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend. And a special thanks to all of our partners who participated, particularly the Department of Radiology, my team from Equity and Community Health, the Center for Community Health Improvement, the People's Heart Project, which is just so innovative. And we look forward to supporting that. And everyone you see here on this team, none of this could be done without everybody's contribution. So I wish everybody a wonderful afternoon, weekend, summer, and we will see you in the days and weeks to come. Thank you.